Our body is always communicating with us, always. But none of us learned the language. None of us were given a handbook of, hey, here's how your body works. It's going to start communicating with you, and here's the language of your body, right? So what we're left here is our body's speaking one language, we're speaking another, and we don't have a translator. And so what happens is that we have to learn to listen to the body. Most of the time, when we experience pain or dysfunction in our body, we immediately go to, that's a problem, let me go fix it. Rather than being like, oh, hey, my body's trying to communicate something to me. What if I became inquisitive about it? What if I started to relate to my body? So the number one thing I can tell people is it's about a relationship with your body, and we explore that relationship and we end up detaching, but I don't want it to be like that we let go of, but we re-relate to our body in my healing sessions, is because right now you have a relationship with your body based off your past. And if left to your own devices, you're going to relate to your body in the only way that you know how. You have no other way. But this is something people can even just start attempting and playing with on their own, is that, let's say you have a sensation over on your right side, right? You just allow your awareness to come to where your body is actually bringing you deeper into a sensation. Whereas most people, what they do is want to run away from that. So actually go to it.
Great title for a podcast, Blessings.
Thank you. Yes, I love it.
What a great meditation.
We are here to learn in the spirit of life.
I'm all about believe. You're about spreading blessings. It's great.
What about your blessings? What's the biggest blessing of life?
What a great question.
Because it's the Blessings podcast, I have to ask you, what is your biggest lesson in life?
My biggest lesson in life.
A whole lot of conversations with people about life and how those things manifest as blessings and lessons, and sometimes both.
It's my connection.
You're going to get schooled.
The journey is the journey.
What you and me are searching for are the blessings in this life.
Remember the reality of how sweet people are.
Spread blessings around the world.
You are the most remarkable energy. You make me pause, make me excited, make me think, and make me spontaneously come up with an answer. This is another one of those great moments in time in my life. Thank you for reaching out to ask if I would do the show.
Welcome back to Blessings, my friends. One of the hardest lessons that we are subjected to in life is that we must have difficult experiences. No one is immune to suffering. And this is often where we learn the most valuable things that help us to become the best possible version of ourselves and to access a higher consciousness. My guest today has experienced trauma, from childhood injuries to losing her mother to homicide. And she has developed a sense of resilience that allows her to help others heal and to activate their own inner strength to live life, as she says, in delight. She is a change consultant, a doctor of physical therapy, an intuitive healer, a transformational coach, and now author with her book, Good Grief, The Journey from Grief to Joy, which is coming out now, should be available at the time of this recording. Welcome, Dr. Devin DeGreif, to the show. Am I pronouncing that right? I can do that.
You got it spot on. Spot on.
That was one of my things I forgot to ask you. Pronunciation of your name. Oh my gosh. Great. Welcome, Devin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody.
All right. I love to start out with kind of a big question. So I have a big one for you. Why do you think, in your estimation, that bad things or difficult experiences happen in our life? Why are we subjected to that?
To transform us, for us to realize who we really are. There's a version of us that we all are under the illusion of who we are. And what happens is that somewhere across your life, something's going to happen where you question who you are and what life is about and what the hell are we doing here? And for some of us, for me, it's like a big traumatic event that's a big wake-up call. Some people can have near-death experiences, and some people can have, right, we all have our unique story, but I see it as that is the very catalyst for us to start questioning what our life is about and what do we want our lives to be about.
Yeah, I think I'm always in the throes of that. I think those of us who are deep thinkers, highly sensitive people, tapped into kind of what's happening at an energetic level, those who question that frequently. And it's interesting that when you think about transformation. So do you think that people who want to avoid suffering are never going to be able to access true transformation?
The truth be told is that transformation is going to happen, right? Like change is inevitable. Change is going to happen, whether we resist it or not. It's going to happen, right?
It is happening.
It is happening. It's always happening. And so when we're resisting that or we're denying it, what we're doing is we're causing more suffering. We're causing ourselves to actually like put the brakes on the car that's already moving, and it's just, we're rolling. We can't, yeah, it can feel better to have those brakes on, but the truth is the car is rolling, right? And so it's causing more of the suffering, the more that we're actually resisting what our soul tension is really pushing us forward towards.
Yeah. So leaning into it.
Yeah. And there's a delicate nature to like leaning into it, right? So I think we hear this a lot of leaning into it, but there's reasons why people don't lean into it. And there's more, that's where what I help people find out is what's in the way, right? And it's not a matter of even clearing it or getting it out of the way. But what happens is that a lot of the healing journey, people will focus on, right? We all know that we have a higher, if you're intuitive or if you're highly sensitive, you know, you have a higher self that is around you and like you're connected to, and you want to lean into it, but there's usually a reason why we're not leaning into it. And so if we can uncover what some of those unconscious patterns are that usually have something to do with that old identity of ourselves, and that's very individual for every single person, we need to be able to bring that up into conscious awareness, because if it's underneath the surface in unconscious awareness, that's where it's left to do its own thing that we feel like we don't have control over. I know I want to do better, but why can't I get over that thing? We got to learn about the thing. We got to learn about what inside of us is calling us in, basically.
Right. To uncover things that are hidden in there that are preventing us.
Yeah, because it's usually the uncovered, the unconscious that is having the unconscious patterns play out to where you're like, I know I should be doing something differently, but why am I not? That's where it's extremely helpful and almost, I would say, critical to have a mirror from somebody who has an expertise and an experience in that. And that's the people that come and work with me, whether it be online or in person, is they've gone to, it can manifest in a physical ailment, right? So like chronic illness or chronic disease or chronic depletion, autoimmune disorders. And so it can actually manifest in physical. And then sometimes people come from more of the spiritual, energetic side of things where they just don't feel well in their psyche. And there's usually an interplay with the body in that too. But basically, the reasons and rationale as to why a person can be held back within themselves is different for each person. So it can be, I don't go too far off here, but like people who come to me with physical ailments, they've already exhausted all the physical stuff. All the MRIs show everything's clear, everything's fine, everything's good. But it's usually something back in their history, whether it be in their childhood or whether it be in their lineage. And so there's this piece of the intuitive healing work that I do of that we're conscious being inside of a body. There's all sorts of reasons why we can be holding ourselves back, but we're in the suffering. And what I want to tell people is, yes, you can do it on your own, but if you're in the suffering, and you just get help, get an expert so that you don't suffer any longer. My big thing is like my story's out there, and why I'm out in the world is because I want people to suffer less. Let's shorten it.
Because it's possible. So how did you get interested in healing?
Oh my gosh, from my own pain, I wanted to heal. So I had broke my tailbone 3 times as a kid, had horrible pelvic pain, had urinary leakage, had constipation. And when I'd gone to, during my teenage and early 20s, I'd gone to gynecologists and they were like, everything's fine, you're normal. And I'm like, this doesn't feel normal. And so then I ended up developing knee pain as well, and ended up having, because I didn't know what to do when I'm like 19, right? And so I got knee surgery on each of my knees. And although I felt better in some regards, I also felt very wobbly inside of myself. You're unstable at that point. And so I was actually on this quest to figure out how to heal my own body first. It actually started with me healing my body and learning about strength training. And so my undergrad is in exercise science and all that. But it was when my mom was murdered, is that it wasn't only my physical ailments, it was now my spiritual, emotional. And now I'm at discord of existing in my body. Like at this point, I don't want to exist in my body. I'm like, just get me out of here. So I was living disassociated for 2-3 years. It's amazing to me that like when I go back, I'm like, how does a human being do that? How did I do that? And it really speaks to that strength and fortitude of the spirit of somehow I encapsulated myself to bear through the thickest of it. But then this is where the healing comes in, is because traditional methodologies in Western medicine are going to give somebody an antidepressant in this state, right? My soul knew that's not my path. It's not my path. Like every fiber of my being was like, no, that's not our path. But there was this one point actually where I gave into it because I don't know what else to do. And so I tried an antidepressant with the psychiatrist for 2 days, 2 days. And my suicidal thoughts and my amount of regulation in my system was way worse. And so at that moment, it was like this junction of the way that I'm going to heal this has got to be true to my path. Everybody else is going to have their own opinions on it, but I'm the one living inside of here. And so that's where this quest of finding that inner knowing starts, right? And I was actually in PT school in a Western medicine, getting my doctorate at this time and feeling like I want to learn more of the alternative things, but I also appreciate the science of things, right? And so this was this really cool junction of I'm going to go to PT school and get this doctorate, but I'm going to end up sharing what healing actually is to the world in my own way. And this is where I now blend the science and the spirit, because that's what ended up happening for me. Yes, there were timeframes where I needed specific manual therapy techniques, and one methodology is osteopathic manipulation called visceral manipulation. That was huge for my body, like getting my intestines untwisted, because when you get a coccyx injury, what happens is there's a torsional load up your spine. And basically, long story short, your intestines absorb that energy. So there was, what I want to speak to is that there was a physical component that I needed hands-on therapy, right? I needed hands-on skilled thing. But then there was this point where the emotions were correlated with those physical things, right? So my interest in healing came from like my own path, and there's got to be a way. And my intuition was telling me there is another way. And every step of my healing journey is I was taking the wisdom that I was experiencing in my own healing and then sharing it with people in my clinic. And then when COVID happened, I started coming in online, and I'm amazed at what I could help people with online. But it's all through, I was like, in my gut, my soul was like, I know there's a different way, and it hasn't been forged yet. I'm going to do it. And so that's how I've done it, is really,
Wow.
yeah.
So much. Okay. So let's just rewind that a smidge, because I know people are wondering right now, okay, the two big questions.
Yep.
One, how did you break your tailbone? And 3 times? How'd that happen?
I know, right? This is my joke, is that the universe was saying you will be a pelvic therapist. So I'm a pelvic.
I mean, isn't that interesting?
Isn't it? Because like third time's a charm. Yeah. So the first time was a wild, remember those old like plastic discs as kids, you'd go down sledding in the snow. So like we had this purple plastic disc that you would just get on the snow and just sled down as kids.
Flying saucer.
Yeah. And we were at this mountain, and my little sister was sitting in front of me in the sled. And when we went down, there was a boulder hidden underneath of the snow. And so all of her weight came onto me, and then my tailbone went right into the boulder. So that was like the biggest one, where it was like this whole dysregulation up into my system, because pelvic injuries don't only stay in the pelvis, they go up the spine because the body's looking how to distribute the force. I just share that because I think a lot of people who have pelvic pain or spinal stuff, this stuff just doesn't get talked about. But yeah, so then the second one was like in middle school, a kid thought it would be funny to pull a chair out from underneath me before I sat down and went on a concrete floor. This is all within, I think, a year or two of the first injury. And then the third one was I was at a neighbor's friend's house, and it was one of those old rope swings that has a piece of wood, and I was just swinging and the rope broke and just bam. And so my joke is that I was destined to be a pelvic therapist and be a specialist in pelvic conditions, but chronic pain and these specialty complex cases that most people can't figure out.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the things that happen to us in childhood, and in particular, these things that have happened to you, we think of it as, oh, I'm a physical therapist because this happened, but maybe that happened because you were destined to be a physical therapist. I know that's what you believe and just said, but we can all take that back into our own lives. But I think that's really, like, just even from a practical standpoint, I can remember as a child falling on my tailbone many times. I don't know why it doesn't happen to us really as adults, but as children, I think we do tend to fall in that area more frequently.
And so here's the fascinating part of what that correlates to in our spiritual embodiment journey is our root chakra, or our tailbone, is at that real base, which is a representation of our stability and our safety within this vessel. So if I as a spirit don't feel safe, I'm not going to be rooted I'm not going to be present. So there's a direct correlation to when people have lack of presence in their body and what ailments they have had, and vice versa, chicken or the egg kind of thing.
Right.
But this is oftentimes where I will have people come to me that, let's say, like headaches. Right? I have a lot of women that will come with me with migraines and headaches. And when I listen to their body, actually shares with me more of the memory of a coccyx injury as a kid. And because a lot of us did have this, because it's just your kids, you're just doing the thing, right?
It's very common as a kid. Yeah.
It is. And
I can
because
remember
this,
it.
just like skating, like ice
Yeah,
skating. How many
you
times
fall.
have you fallen in ice skating?
Because you're doing more risky things as a child. You're climbing trees. I did all kinds of crazy things just
Yeah.
in my everyday life. And I wouldn't call them crazy. You're just taking more risks.
Yeah. You're living in the moment, right? As a kid, you're living so in the moment and you have no throwing caution to the wind. You're just existing. So
You're
things
playing.
happen.
You're playing more.
We're playing, yeah. But basically, our body holds these memories. And if we don't go attend to them, they just fester in the body and they can lead to physical ailments. But yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Is the root chakra, which chakra is that?
So right at your perineum. So right at the base of your spine, where for women, it's going to be where the vulva and the anus are. There's a point right in between there called the perineum. And then for men, it's right in between the testicles and the anus, right there, right at our base where if basically whoever's sitting right now is if you just tune into between your two sits bones.
Yeah.
That's our chakra 1 base foundation.
Yeah.
Even if you're not into chakras, just think of it scientifically. Like this is our base. Our pelvis is our stable foundation that our whole spine and everything else is built upon.
And because it's your foundation, that is the part of you that is tied to your ancestral trauma as well. Is that true?
Well, I would say that it can manifest in all sorts of different areas, but it does depending on what it is. So, unfortunately, we see a lot of women who have had sexual trauma, and there tends to be some sort of lineage correlation to that. And it's not to say that it's always the case, but okay, there's so many examples that come to me right now. Think of the lineage trauma of anybody in the Holocaust, right? Like that stuff will be held. And so we can have unconscious holding patterns within our body that relate to our life story, but also can relate to our lineage. And believe it or not, you can actually separate from that story, not from the forget it, but like what's mine, what's my family's kind of thing. And that's a big part of healing. So yeah, it can manifest there, but I just don't want to limit it to only that area.
Okay.
But a lot of times if there was a safety issue and some of those real foundational sense of like food and shelter. Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. I have actually done some exploration with that in particular in my own lineage because my mom, I don't know if you read anything about my story, but my mom suffered from severe childhood trauma and I never knew about it until I was older and she had already passed away. And she tried to hide it thinking that she was protecting me from it, but I found out that it was passed on. Even without her knowing, and as hard as she tried to protect us from it by not talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting when you think about your ancestral wounds that you don't even have to be consciously aware of things in your lineage for them to travel through.
Because it's when it's kept unconscious is when it stays in the bloodline.
Yes.
So it's actually the worst thing. And that's what our parents thought they were doing us a good job of not sharing things, right? But what happens is that's now in the unconscious, but now it's like in all the family's unconscious. And it's actually those that make it conscious is where the healing happens, right? My mom had trauma, whereas I was the one in my family line to be like, enough is enough. I'm going to bring this story out and speak to it. So we're speaking to it, but it's from a place of functional healing, not just getting caught up in the story, which is probably why our parents didn't want to, because they didn't have resources. Every generation has more resources. And our generation is definitely taking on the baton of healing things. But yeah, it really is actually more damage to keep things unconscious.
Very interesting. So I love what you said in the very beginning about how trauma gets stored in the organs. And in particular, you talked about the spine and the intestines. And I have been following this for years because I love the work of Louise Hay and some of these people early on who talked about this. And now what you're finding as a doctor is that science is actually backing this up.
Yeah.
And I've read also a lot from Gabor Mate, who talks about this.
Yep.
So it's so interesting to me. What is something that you think people need to know in order to heal from things that are actually physically affecting them, that are also tied to other things like trauma in particular, but maybe not even trauma does it have to be some sort of horrible trauma, or could it be So yeah, talk about this a little bit. How
Yeah,
this
no, I love this question because this is a common one because a lot of people hear my story and they're like, I didn't experience like that big. Whoa. But no, it's actually, this is just part of the human experience. And I just happen to have had a big thing so that I could wake up and be here in a bigger way to share with more people, to have less people suffering. And truth be told, is the one thing that I could share is that our body is always communicating with us, always. But none of us learned the language. None of us were given a handbook of, hey, here's how your body works. It's going to start communicating with you. And here's the language of your body, right? So what we're left here is our body's speaking one language, we're speaking another, and we don't have a translator. And so what happens is that we have to learn to listen to the body. Most of the time, when we experience pain or dysfunction in our body, we immediately go to, that's a problem, let me go fix it. Rather than being like, oh, hey, my body's trying to communicate something to me. What if I became inquisitive about it? What if I started to relate to my body? So the number one thing I can tell people is it's about a relationship with your body, and we explore that relationship and we end up detaching. But again, I don't want it to be like we let go of, but we re-relate to our body in my healing sessions, is because like right now you have a relationship with your body based off your past. And if left to your own devices, you're going to relate to your body in the only way that you know how. You have no other way. But for people, this is something people can even just start attempting and playing with on their own, is that let's say you have a sensation over on your right side, right? And you just allow your awareness to come to where your body is actually bringing you deeper into a sensation. Whereas most people, what they do is want to run away from that. So actually go to it. And then furthermore, depending on what level of somatic, like in somatics, you actually want to let the body cave towards that and like actually give in to exaggerate it. And what that does is that's going to bring us into tissues that are holding usually an emotion or an experience. And so that's just a beginner thing of just starting to play with, what if I did give into it? What would that feel like? What is that different? Because what I want to be clear on here is that when you aren't used to doing this, it's actually, I don't want to say re-traumatizing, but it's just you're getting into territory that if you're not experienced with, I don't recommend you getting into on your own, and just go to a craniosacral therapist, somato-emotional therapist, someone like myself that can guide you through that. And then once you have a few sessions, you can do these things on your own. But again, it's learning. You got to learn how to re-relate with the body. But I would say that's one thing that if I could have people start to orient in a different way to, would be that like, see what your relationship with your body is currently like, and just be real with yourself about what resources, what education did you have, and do you need to look at it from a different perspective? Usually we do. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. How would you like to get the best text of your life? This is your sign that it's time to add something powerful to your morning routine that sets you up for success and reminds you that you are worthy and makes you unstoppable. It's a motivational text message from me, a real human. I am Mitzi Campbell, a mindset specialist, and I know that it is possible for you to live the life of your dreams. My morning motivational text messages help you up-level your mindset, your happiness, and your success. Sign up for a 2-week free trial at yourpositivemoment.com and change your life today. Join the movement so we can all thrive together. yourpositivemoment.com. And I think it's interesting to think about how you could have something like, let's say that you have a heart issue. And of course, you want to see a cardiologist. You want to make sure you're doing your due diligence medically, but it might not just be about that organ, the heart. It's probably something a lot deeper in the psyche, right?
Yeah. So those sort of things, some of the most obvious things that are just, if we just went to the most simplified version, if you had a heartbreak that you never actually processed, you're going to be holding that wound in your heart, which can have you holding back energetically. So then your heart's not going to be pumping with its full fruition, right?
Yeah.
But then also too, lungs are a big one, right? So like lungs carry grief. So if you're experiencing grief, you can have to where your heart is challenged because there's an interrelationship between heart and lungs. Yeah. So the beauty of the work that I do, and yes, I can do this online, is I do a technique called listening. I'm not here to tell the body what's going on. I'm actually here to ask the body, what do you need to tell us? You have the wisdom. You tell us. And I'm here as the interpreter. And so when we start to listen to the body and we start to let the body express what has been repressed, then that's when we start navigating that internal world in a much more holistic, integrated way versus, okay, you stay here, you stay there. Body is only talked to when I go to my chiro, and that's not even a talking to, that's a manipulating of, right? You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to just practice that, just fool around with that idea of listening to your body.
Yeah.
What would be something you would suggest to people just to get started on their own?
Totally. So I would say stand up and just, if your body could cave, if you said, hey body, show me what's going on. And if your body could just cave, like if this is naturally what my body would go, is my body would cave, it would have this tilt to the left, this rotation to where there's a contraction in my lower belly here. But what you do is when you're standing up is you allow your body to take you into that, and you're gathering into that energetically. And then what can happen is that if you stay there with it, your body can start to work through it and to start to unwind it and start to move, and it starts to dance. Truthfully, like if you really get into it, and the more that you play with that and get skilled with that or are guided through that, the easier it becomes to let go and just let the body do that. But that's something that anybody could do right now.
Okay, that's really interesting. And it makes me think about somatic dancing. And like a lot of yogis will do, sometimes they even call it trance dance. It's just letting the music take you, but just listening to the tune of your own body.
Exactly. What I was going to say is that, I love ecstatic dance. I love letting music move through us, but that's the music is moving you versus body moving you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a thing that you can at some point in more when you've had practice use, you can work with music and still be in tune with your body. There's a way to do that. But what most people do is, because again, they weren't trained in this stuff, is they go in with the best intentions. You'll get releases. You'll feel really good after moving. Movement is great, but it's not going to be that specific, individualized, like the most pinpoint thing that you need. And that's what the big difference in the work that I do is, that if we go generalized, you're going to feel good. But if we can get freaking specific, that's where we unlock things, and then your life starts to change.
Okay. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. And I want to just think for a minute about asking people how they can open up to this perspective. I think when people are coming to see you, they're obviously open to it. But I'm talking right now to the person who has some kind of a chronic issue, whether it's a chronic illness or just an injury that's caused pain that won't go away.
Yep.
How can you speak to that person and just say, what if what I'm offering, what's out there and available to you beyond the medical traditional system might be helpful for you?
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question. And not everyone that comes to me is full on board. I have people that actually come to me that their friend told them to come because they're like, they've tried everything, and their friend, they're like, I don't know why I'm here, but I heard that you're a witch doctor and I'm going to come to you. But so I love this question, because those are the people that have the most opportunity. But if left to their own devices and we can't open up this conversation for them, then their world's going to feel that really limited. But the first thing is just to notice, like, is what you're doing working? If it is, awesome, freaking keep going. But if it's not, let's like step back for a second and just look at that for a moment, because what a lot of times we can do is we can really get into what other people think or what seems logical or what the right way is. And we've gone down this rabbit hole, and we're just realizing, you know what, this isn't actually serving me. So that'd be the next step. And then from there, it's, if you were to imagine for a moment that your spirit self was living above you or living beside you, and just some sort of representation of, there's a greater part of you that, to be honest, if we can be a little bold here, is saying you're not dead yet, right? You're not dead yet. So your soul's still here. And if you could imagine for a moment, if your soul could whisper in your ear or give you some sort of inkling of, is there a more holistic way to look at your existence, right? Like, you can hear me say, or you can hear Mitzi say, or anybody on any podcast in the world, that we're a soul inside of a body. We've heard that. I think we're all on board with that nowadays. And if you're approaching whatever's going on with you only looking at one facet of your being, it's not going to work, because you're a whole being. You're a whole being. You're a mind, a body, a spirit inside of this body. And if we leave any aspect of you out of the picture, you're not going to feel whole. You're not integrating all of you. So if what is going on, if the way that you're approaching it is if you can step back and acknowledge it's not working, and then just look at what aspects of am I approaching and what aspects am I maybe denying or didn't even realize that could be addressed. I think that's a big one. Is I think the science world lives over here, the spiritual world lives over here. And so people can go to the Western medicine, people can go, maybe they might go to an acupuncturist because they want to try it. But I love to have these conversations because science and spirit's actually saying the same thing. They just speak different languages. Speak different languages. Like vibrations, for instance. I actually talk about this in my book a lot. And it's one of the most foundational things I teach people is we're always engaging with vibration. The Western medicine world is going to talk about it more about EMF, like Heart Math Institute. And everybody's nowadays about heart coherence, heart-brain coherence, right? So the frequency of my mind and my heart are in unison. So my system's going to be more regulated. Spirituality has been saying the same thing of have your head and your heart be unified, be one with thyself, right? And that brings us into a regulated state. So I just really feel like there's an opportunity for people who are struggling that have been trying to go at it in a different way to do it in a more holistic, unified, integrated way that, again, has you suffering less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't think it is a coincidence that your last name is DeGreif.
Not at all.
Is that the name you were born with? You're not married?
Yes.
Are you married? Okay.
Nope. This is my birth name, Devin DeGreif. And absolutely, when this was going on, you'll really appreciate this, is that when it was just going on, there was just this point where I just realized the meaning of my name. I'm here to bring the divine of grief, like to show the divinity of grief, to show what comes out of grief. But yeah, that's my birth name, Devin DeGreif.
Okay. That's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And it does take us, though, into a bit of the shadow. And that would be the second question I think people probably had pop into their minds as we were talking earlier. And that is, can you share with us the story of what happened to your mom?
Yeah, so I go a lot more in depth into it, but the gist of the story essentially is that my mom went to a self-help seminar. And I grew up in Vegas, and my mom went to California to go to a self-help seminar. And there was a guy there that she met that portrayed a different version of who he actually was, right? Mm. And she became intimate with him, and he came from California over to Las Vegas. And basically, lo and behold, we believe that he was stealing money from my mom. And knowing my mom, she would say something. And there's a big story that I don't need to really go into, but basically he killed her, right? So he killed her. And it goes really in depth into the book of all the details. And unfortunately, I don't know, is CSI in Las Vegas actually had Dateline NBC actually following CSI in Vegas during this time frame. So there's actually an episode on Dateline NBC of the 6-hour confession that the murderer gave and was just talking as if you and I sitting here talking about dinner. And so it was this very trippy, wild experience of one, right? Murder sensationalized, right? We have so many murder shows and so many crime shows and everything. And I never grew up watching those or anything like that, but it was this moment of, is this real? What is real life? Like ultimate shock of like reality cut down. Yeah. And having to process like deep existential crisis, basically. Yeah. So I go more in depth of the murder in my book, but what the big thing is, what I want people to focus in on is my story isn't actually about, I don't want it to end in, oh, the grief and oh, so sad. It's more of, look at who I am now, look at where I am now. And that transforming out of that shadow and out of that darkness wasn't easy, but I'm here to tell the tale. But the murder was heinous, like brutal. Like people watch these shows that we separate from him, right? We don't realize these are real people's lives. These are family members. Like I'm having to look at the hole in the backyard that this guy attempted to bury my mom's body in the desert, but he couldn't because the desert was too hard. And so he ends up chopping her up in pieces and putting her into a trash can. I'm sorry to share those visuals with people, but it's just to show that it's insane and I'm still here, right? Like the things that I've had to work through in my consciousness to not be haunted by these images is insane. But what I want people to really take home is that this is the level of conscious healing that we can do if we're willing to face it. And again, it's not easy. It takes a bravery and a boldness that that I believe we all have. We really do. We have this strength and fortitude within us to face these things. But my mom's story and my story is just wild. It's just wild. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. I'm so sorry to hear that you had to go through that. How old were you?
23.
Oh, man.
Yep. Yeah. Thank
Do you
you.
have a support system?
So I didn't actually have too much. I have a very small family. And at the time, I was actually just recently engaged. And my fiance at the time had no clue how to deal with this and manage this. And we were actually moving states, like we were packed up to be moving before all this happened. And so I was actually very alone. And this is where existential crisis comes in, of you feel very isolated. And it's just like, how do you navigate this? What is reality? And I'm talking to spirit, like screaming at spirit, just what the hell is going on? Why this? Why that? But it was those conversations with spirit and me being alone that actually allowed me to like work through it, to be honest, right? But I was very alone and did not have a great support system at all. But that's when what happened is I started to lean into a larger support network and started to develop more expansive points of contact and like basically people of the world became my family, right? Like over time, and leaning into a wider support network. But that came over time of me realizing and spirit telling me like there is support for you. And then a human would come and appear and be like, okay, there it is. But no, a lot of my journey has been very alone by myself with spirit, with the divine. And I actually think that most people's are actually, but it's in that realization that we're not alone, that we can start to lean into our greater networks and create greater networks. It was in that loneliness that spirit was telling me you're not alone. And then, like I was saying, like a friend would come in that's just like the most perfect divine spirit of a person who's like lovingly supportive and just enjoys being there for you, like just the right people at just the right time. But no, yeah, in the beginning, it was tough. It was real. Yeah.
Oh, wow. How difficult. I think what's interesting is that, and I find this in my own life, that I think that the universe has a way of isolating you and making you alone when you have something really hard to go through.
Yeah. Because it forces you into those questions, the existential questions of why, what's going on. I used to say this, I don't say it so much anymore, but like I would always say, like, the universe has a lesson to teach you, and it will keep reappearing until you learn that lesson. Like it will come up, it will manifest in different ways, right?
Yes.
So it is a pressure cooker in many ways of being like, wake up, wake up.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think the most beautiful part of a difficult story like that is that it shows us there is always something good that we can take from something difficult or perceived as bad, even the most traumatic things.
Yep. Yeah, that's what the alchemists would call making gold out of lead. So in magic and alchemy, the actual process is lead turning into gold. That's a metaphor for our consciousness of taking the darkness and taking the heavy, dense experiences and transforming them into gold, into what I now get to share with people and help people wake up to and realize and claim their own lives back. That's the gold out of my lead, my heavy experiences. Yeah, I would agree.
I'm sure that makes you super effective as a healing professional.
Oh my gosh, so much. Because what I would say is that because of the depth of darkness that I endured and went through myself, is I can hold and be with people in some of the darkest. And I don't say that from a prideful place. It's more of from a place of that consciousness is complex in general, but definitely with trauma, it becomes a lot more complex because there's a lot of disassociative strategies and different things that we do unconsciously to contort and manage. And because I'm so comfortable, but also trained in this way of just being very neutral and very allowing things to emerge and being the guide, not the healer. Like healing is not actually being the healer. It's actually facilitating the inner being to heal themselves. And so, yeah, I can help people with some of the most complex situations. Yeah. Whether it be trauma or I have a woman this recently that she'd been going to this healer in Florida online. She's in Australia, but she'd been going to a healer online. And this woman kept clearing entities from her. And she would say that, okay, a few days and it would come back. It wasn't an entity. It wasn't an entity. It was actually an aspect of her consciousness that she separated from as a kid that she was just putting in a holding space. And so we had to reclaim that and support her in that. But she was like, no one's ever been able to do that, Devin. I've been going to people for years, but it's just because of my life experience that I'm uncomfortable in the uncomfortable and I can just hang with it to be in service to someone's highest.
Amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you work with cranial sacral therapy, and I have had that for myself. And I think it's it's been around forever, but it is really gaining in popularity. Can you talk about what that is a little bit and who might need it?
Totally. Oh my gosh. So craniosacral therapy has been around for a long time, but it is gaining steam because people are looking for effective alternative modalities. So we all have a cranium and a sacrum. So cranium is the head, sacrum is that lower diamond triangular shaped bone at the bottom of the spine. So in between the cranium and the sacrum, there's this fluid called craniosacral fluid. It's inside of an encasement called the dura, which encases our central cord, our spinal cord, and our brain. We actually have a natural movement of craniosacral fluid from our brain down our spinal cord, actually throughout our whole body, that is reminiscent of the movement like a jellyfish. Okay, so it has like the ebb and the flow of the ocean. There's a natural rhythm. All of our body parts and organs and everything have this natural rhythm to them that is homeostasis, right? We have a heartbeat, but the brain and the craniosacral system has its own beat and rhythm. What happens is, whether it be physical, emotional, or whatever, if there is a kink in the hose, if you will, so somewhere, anywhere between the cranium down the spine, is if there's any sort of diminishment of the fluid flow of that system, what happens is there's a dysregulation in the system related to that area. Like an extreme common one is like concussions, even ones that were minor, right? Back in the day when people had minor concussions, it was like, oh, just rest, you'll be fine. What that does is that there's the intracranial pressure inside somebody's head now is higher. So then the body's going to compensate with that fluid system and create pressure systems. And so this is the premise of all of this, is that basically at any point in time in a person's life, if you introduce craniosacral therapy, what happens is you're allowing the body's self-correcting mechanisms via that system to like initiate. This is like our natural healing mechanism that we were all born with as babies. But when stuff happens in life, then that system can be off and our system can be dysregulated. So craniosacral therapy, fun fact about it, is it actually was first used on newborns. So when newborns are either coming through from C-section or having a dystonia or having an issue with their birth, is that the sooner we can get our hands on and give craniosacral therapy, the more regulated that baby's central nervous system is. And so it's really effective if we can get like super, super young. But truth be told is that our cells remember our healing state. So at any point in your life, if you get craniosacral therapy, you're basically starting to work with your inner healing mechanism.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. It feels good. And I've had 2 different practitioners do it for me, and they've both been very different and super beneficial for the system in particular for me. But I also have scoliosis and I have a spinal cord irregularity. So I did it for that reason. I think it's a subtle force.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that most of the things that in our mind are effective are not subtle at all. Like a lot of people love going to a chiropractor, feeling and hearing that crack, and we feel better in the moment. This methodology is more of, it's getting back to the real root of your healing mechanism, not from an outside in versus inside out. So craniosacral therapy and any of the methodologies I'm sharing about are more of an inside out mechanism. Yeah. And so it is like a reprogramming to how you even approach healing. And this is longer and more sustainable. This will give you a quick fix and get you high for a moment and feel like, I'm doing good, but then it'll be back next week. Yep. Yeah. And just to share is that, so craniosacral therapy, it is relative to each person because, again, each person is a unique being with skills. So like the way I do craniosacral therapy, I'm going to be melding with my other skills. And then I do it online. And that's something that people can have a hard time wrapping their head around. But then once you experience it, it's, oh, wow. We can actually do that. We're that interconnected to where we can facilitate your fluids moving through the internet because everything's frequency.
Oh, okay. I love that. I think the most interesting part of this whole shebang is that we really have to take our healing into our own hands.
Yes.
So you have to advocate for yourself. How many of us, I had this journey myself where you go to this doctor and that doctor and this alternative practitioner and this, all different kinds of people. But you have to do what you said earlier, consider yourself as a holistic entity. And that's how true healing is going to be able to take place.
Yep. That's the first step. Basically, like my first intention when people come into me, whether it be online or in person, is get them connected to their source, their inner wisdom, their root, their being, because that is where everything, it just becomes easier. And that's where you know what's true for you. If acupuncture is true with you, if you need to go to the MRI, these are things that, like, again, it's not saying this is good, this is bad, but it all comes back to what you're saying is that this is your life. It's your body. It's your existence. And if you aren't in the driver's seat, who is? If you're not here, who, like, it's yours. Take the wheel.
Yeah.
And
Take the wheel.
Take the wheel. And know where, and we got to be realistic where we have our limits. But that's where the more that you're in that driver's seat, you're going to get a sense of, I just get this sense that I need to explore this. I get this sense I need to explore that, versus the internet says, or so-and-so says. And then you get there and you're just like, your gut's turning and you're like, I know in my gut, I should not be here. Right.
Mhm.
But, and be paying attention to those energetics, right? Like that, these are things that I think actually a lot more people are probably experiencing. But again, if you're not skilled in interpreting that, but yes, that's the take home message, Mitzi, is it's yours.
It's yours. And what I'm wondering is, how can you tell the difference between fear that's coming in from like the ego and your intuition and following your true inner sense?
Yeah, I would say that honestly, if someone's in an entangled cycle, it's going to be a little difficult to discern that for yourself. So that's where a session with somebody to be able to get some separation of that, who's what's what, you're going to, you have to delineate that out. So I'm not saying people can do this stuff on your own, but again, if you're entrapped in something, just acknowledge that and just get out of your own way and get some help. But what people can do is just simple journaling right now of, if I were to really isolate, what am I actually scared of? And just write out as if fear could talk. If fear was talking, what would fear say? Fear would say, I'm scared of blah, 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 blah. And just write down as if you are fear itself, right? Then what that's going to do is that's going to start to delineate, okay, so what is actually fear and what is actually higher wisdom? And so I would say that's just a simple way to start in that process, because once you start to take it all out of here and put it on paper and get it a little organized, and again, that can just be a sheet of paper where you just draw a line down, but you got to untangle yourself a little bit first.
Okay. Yes. And in terms of the various alternative healing practices, what are the top things that you find to be really effective, that really work?
Craniosacral therapy. However, and it's interesting because I haven't been asked this question if I were to say what's 1, 2, and 3. So I'll just give the top 3 is breath work, meditation, and craniosacral therapy, of things that people can be doing and instilling in their lives. And here's why. So craniosacral therapy, we've already talked about, is that's your body's natural healing mechanism. And if you get in contact with that, when you close your eyes, you can connect to your inner healer and be working with your tissues more and more. Breath work, reason why is that's an automatic down regulator. So our emotions are directly tied to our breath. And so if we start to regulate our breath, not through force, but just, there's all different sorts of breath techniques that you can learn, but simple ones like alternate nostril breathing, but some sort of breath practice. So you start regulating your system. But again, you're coming at it from, I'm inside of here. I'm the one breathing. I'm going to be regulating my system. And then meditation. There's different types of meditation, but if you can get to a state of some sort of silence within yourself, even if it's for 3 to 5 minutes, research actually shows that consistent time frame of just trying to put yourself in that state for 2 to 3 minutes every day has much more profound effects than somebody trying to be like, I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes. And I'd love to go more into depth with that, because I think there's a lot of myths around meditation. I think a lot of people struggle with meditation and think that thoughts should not exist in meditation. I just want to make sure to say that, like, thoughts are a normal part of meditation. You're going to have thoughts, but why we meditate is because when we go to sit, there's going to be a lot of noise. And when you learn to sit and just be the witness of the noise, what happens is it just floats away like a cloud. But it's when we're in the noise and we're identifying with those thoughts and feelings is when we're in it. We're not the observer. And so if you're struggling with that, then I just want you to know that it's normal and common to have thoughts, and it's a matter of just observing them. But doing breath work and craniosacral therapy and coming to your inner self, that becomes easier.
Yeah. When I'm meditating, I will sometimes have that phenomenon of almost like there's 2 people inside of me. Like you're having thoughts, but then you're having thoughts about your thoughts, and then you're having thoughts about your thoughts. That's
a good point, because we have 2 modes of awareness, right? And if we just put it in really black and white, simple terms, we have spirit, we have ego.
Yeah.
So when you are connecting to spirit, you're going to hear ego. But notice how if we're in ego, we don't actually usually hear spirit. The way that I talk about it, spirit whispers, ego screams.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so it takes that time to slow down and be quiet to be able to listen to that softer voice when we're usually just listening to the loudest one.
Yeah. And what's your opinion about the ego? Is it something we should try to eliminate? It's not, I mean, I don't think it's really possible, but
no, I just so funny because it's like your ego asking that question. I was giggling because your tone changed. And it was like,
really, my ego is, wait a minute.
What you talking about?
Actually,
No, but this is so cool because this is such a common myth. No, you're never going to get rid of your ego. It's part of being a human. You need an ego. There's a differentiating between what makes Mitzi and Devin. And the ego is that which allows us to have an individual lived experience. But our whole journey is about transcending that ego and this limited perception of ourselves into who we truly are, but then show up as this unique version, sharing the light of life. But no, if you believe that you need to get rid of your ego, get rid of that right now because you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer longer. It's learning how to navigate. It's everything's relationship is that if we learn, it's about learning, how do I relate to my ego? It's learning to relate to your ego because it is a passenger in this car. I love this metaphor of this car is because if ego's in the driver's seat, where is your spirit in the car? Who's driving? But if you, the spirit, the consciousness that comes in and says, I'm in the driver's seat, ego is still in the car. It's going to have something to say in the back seat. But that's where you get to say, not right now. Not right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So I love that you asked that because I'm sure you're not the only one that has that question because I get that one a lot. And all of the work that I do actually in transformational coaching is about integrating the ego and learning from it and having that's actually the lead. All our egoic stuff is the lead that if we work with in the transformational process, that's where that very egoic stuff is the very thing that is our pathway home to truth, really.
Okay. That's very interesting because I know some of the different traditions would talk about the ego in terms of it being like evil, like it's the opposite force. It's the opposing force. It's the opponent, the whatever.
Yeah. Like in a lot of religions, it's depicted in this, right? If you just think about this idea of the angel and the devil, or heaven and hell, right? It's really a representation of the juxtaposition of consciousness, right? Like we have a dark side, we have a light side, but what happens is that if we start to be mucking around and trying to fix the ego is we're actually getting stuck in it. We're giving it more power because it's not actually a problem. Like this, if we look at it as a problem, we're going to be constantly trying to fix a problem. But if it's not a problem and it's just part of the experience and we're learning how to integrate those, then we're using what's happening in life to transform us and to become alive.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. It's super fascinating. And we didn't really even get into the topic of grief, which I would love to talk with you more about. But I think the best thing for people to do is to get your book. So it's coming out as we speak. So it will be available. And good. You have it there. Good Grief, the journey from grief to joy.
There it is.
With Dr. Devin DeGreif. Easy to remember that title with that name. So I recommend it for everyone to pick that up and to get in touch with Dr. Devin. And before I ask you my final questions, can you just tell us where people can find you? What's the easiest place to connect?
Yeah, easiest place, my website. Everything's on there, drdevindegreif.com.
Okay, perfect. And I ask everyone at the end of the show, what is your biggest lesson and your biggest blessing in life?
Biggest lesson is that everything that you need is within you. And the biggest blessing is that in that realization, that's where life opens up and you get to share it with other people. And that's the real blessing,
effect, right?
What's that?
That's how we create that ripple effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's taking those lessons, realizing the blessing, and then sharing the blessings.
Very beautiful.
And then they just keep coming. The more you share, and they just keep coming. And so it was such a blessing to share this time and space with you.
Thank you. I'm very excited and very honored to have met you. It was very synchronicitous that we came into contact, and I appreciate your time and all of your beautiful energy. Thank you for sharing everything that you shared with us today, and especially for opening up about the vulnerable pieces of your life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for holding a container and being of service to the world in this way.
Hey, everybody still listening, will you go give a 5-star review to this podcast? Mitzi puts in so much effort and so much love into this. She's brilliant. She deserves it. So I am going to go right now. By the way, by the time you hear this and you go give your 5-star review, you should be able to go find my 5-star review of this podcast. But I just want to thank you for what you're doing.